Welcome everyone as you're joining us. My name is Tati. I'm a marketing manager here at Plugin America. We're here to talk today about the 30C tax credits, aka charging incentives. So just a heads up, as you'll notice, today's webinar is going to be recorded and is going to be available on our website and it'll be sent through the link you registered here today. So let's go over our agenda really quick. So we're going to talk about a few different things: why folks should go electric, the benefits of installing EV charging, details about the tax credit, including who is eligible, how to redeem it, the benefits of charger installation, and a lot more. We have a lot to cover today. So, plus, we'll be hearing from an EV driver who went through the process of installing a charger and redeeming the credit, so you have first-hand account. And we're going to have a Q&A section at the end. So please, as we go, feel free to drop questions as we're going, so you can drop them in the Q&A box specifically, and we'll address them at the end. You'll also see that in the chat. Us from Plugin America will be dropping some resources that'll be mentioned, especially at the end. So to kick things off, let's introduce who Plugin America is. So we're a nonprofit that works to accelerate EV adoption through education, advocacy, and research. And as a gentle reminder, we do our best to provide current, accurate information, but we are not tax professionals. So that said, make sure to consult your tax advisor to see if you qualify for what we talk about here today. So we have exciting speakers. Today you're going to be hearing from Ingrid Malmgren, our Senior Policy Director here at Plugin America. We have Catherine Garcia, the Director at the Clean Transport for All at Sierra Club. We have Jordan Bryn from Clean Vehicles and Infrastructure Advocate at the Natural Resources Defense Council. And we have Julio Ortiz Rivera. He is an EV driver who installed a charger at his unit. And those are our amazing speakers for the day. And with that, I will hand it over to our first speaker, Catherine Garcia. Catherine?
Thank you so much, Tati. And hello, I am Catherine Garcia with the Sierra Club's Clean Transportation for All campaign. I'm the director of the campaign there and just want to welcome you. Thank you so much for joining our discussion. We're going to be talking about EV charging incentives today. And we're super excited to talk about 30C, which is the federal incentive designed to support EV drivers, business and property owners, and fleet managers, and talk about resources to help install EV charging. But first, we'd love to get to know you better. So we have designed a poll. Tati, can you please pull up the poll? If our attendees here could please read through these descriptions and select the items that most apply to you. So we have, I am an EV driver, my next car will be an EV, I'm curious about EVs, I own or manage a fleet, I own or manage a property, I'm interested to learn about charging for a business, or I'm interested to learn about charging for a tax-exempt entity. And so our particular webinar today will be discussing resources for these particular qualities, and you can select as many as apply to you. Okay, and Tati, if you can move to the next slide, please. Great. So I'm with the Sierra Club, and that's the oldest environmental organization in the US. And our transportation advocacy is really focused on reducing the harmful environmental and health impacts from the transportation sector. So that includes, we'll be talking about cars today, but broadly, Sierra Club works on all sorts of vehicles, cars, trucks, and buses, and then also aviation and maritime as well. And we are focused on advancing affordable and convenient transportation options. So this incentive, 30C, which we'll be talking about in a moment, is a great example of a policy that's aligned to spur EV adoption and to expand electric vehicle charging across our communities. And this fundamentally makes it more affordable and convenient to charge an EV. And my colleagues today will be providing a lot of timely resources for utilizing the 30C tax credit. Personally, my family does own an EV. And while we personally opted to drive electric because of the environmental and health reasons, I can fully attest that driving an EV makes it more affordable because of lower fuel costs. It is a smoother ride. I have a 5-year-old, so that smooth ride just makes road trips much better. And then we love saving on maintenance costs. So Tati, why don't we go ahead and look to see who's our audience? All right. So we're seeing that the majority of you are currently EV drivers at 72%. And the remaining says my next car will be an EV. And I'm also seeing almost a quarter of folks are interested in learning about charging for a business. So thank you so much for filling out our poll. And Tati, if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so before we hear from our fellow panelists, I want to take a moment to underscore the importance of driving an EV. Many of you already know this, but just to kind of spell it out, EVs are cost less to charge because of the fueling costs of driving a combustion engine. As I mentioned, EVs require less regular maintenance. EVs do have better warranties. Most warranties, depending on the manufacturer, the coverage goes between 8 and 10 years. And wanted to point this out here because there is some misinformation that EVs are not good for the grid. Through managed load growth planning, utilities are working to ensure that the grid remains reliable and adaptable, especially with scheduling for off-peak hours. So if you're charging while folks are sleeping, that is much better for the grid, and EVs can actually help enhance grid performance. Next slide. Here we have a couple more reasons to drive electric because of the combustion cars produce tailpipe emissions. So driving electric will reduce air pollution and improve public health. EVs are fun to drive. We have EVs are better for the environment, and EV drivers really love their cars. Next slide. So I've been working on EV advocacy for almost 10 years now, and I wanted to share this slide just because we have seen so much growth in the variety of EV models over the past 5 to 7 years. There are currently over 100 EV models, and this shows that how many different sizes there are to choose from. And particularly this year and next year, we are going to be seeing a number of new, the used market expanding rapidly as it relates to electric vehicles. Next slide. Okay, and we also want to have a specific slide about fleet electrification here. This names a number of benefits that are specific to fleet owners, thinking about reduced vehicle downtime, thinking through the domestic energy sources, higher fleet operator and driver satisfaction. We've heard from a number of drivers that they really would prefer to drive an electric fleet vehicle over a combustion vehicle. And next slide. All right. Well, I am going to pass it to Jordan. Thanks for your time.
Hi everyone, I'm Jordan Bryn. I'm with the Natural Resources Defense Council, where I advocate for clean vehicles and infrastructure to charge those vehicles. So I'm just going to go over today a few benefits of why you might want to install an EV charger depending on what your perspective is. So next slide, please. So if you're an EV driver or a prospective EV buyer, being able to have access to charging where you live is very convenient because you can just fuel your vehicle whenever you're at home and you don't have to plan or make extra stops for most trips. It also allows you to access lower fuel costs by taking advantage of cheaper residential and overnight electricity charging rates compared to public chargers or compared to gas pumps. And then also having access to home charging can allow you to participate in early newer utility programs like vehicle to grid programs that can give you credits on your electric bill or other benefits, and also can just be kind of fun to try out. Next slide, please. If you're a homeowner or a property manager, there's a lot of reasons that you'll want to have an EV charger installed at your property. First, there's a lot of evidence that having an EV charger at your property can increase sales, the sale value of the property and the rental value, or increase the speed at which a sale happens once the home is on the market. One study from DOE estimated that home resale can increase $5,000 to $20,000 as the price that the home goes for, which more than pays for it. So the charger is more than paying for itself at the end. It can also help you attract and maintain tenants at your property. And there's a lot of evidence around increased lease renewals for properties that have EV chargers. And then also it can just future-proof your property as more municipalities are requiring some form of EV charger readiness through building codes. It's good to go ahead and get ahead of the curve. And also it can signal to prospective tenants and buyers that this is a modernized property, that you're keeping up with the times and keeping the property in good shape. Next slide, please. And then for the last group I'm going to talk about today is small businesses and retailers. There is strong evidence that having a charger near your business increases customer foot traffic, dwell time, and in-store spending by several percentage points for each of those categories. Again, easily helping the charger investment pay for itself, especially when you're taking advantage of tax credits. It can also differentiate your business and demonstrate to the community that you value sustainability and you value providing this resource to the community. And then it can also create a new revenue stream, whether that's by actually charging the customers to use the EV charger or through just bringing in new customers to your store who might not have shopped there before, but now they're coming in more frequently because they know that's a place where they can charge their car. So lots of benefits to businesses to having chargers nearby and on their property. And with that, I will pass it over to Ingrid.
Great, thanks, Jordan. I'm Ingrid Malmgren, Senior Policy Director with Plug-in America, and I'll start off by talking a little bit about EV and charging incentives. So for the last few years, we've had tax credits, federal tax credits of up to $7,500 on new, used, and commercial electric vehicles. These were eliminated on September 30th of 2025. But there's still a tax credit for EV charging infrastructure. It's called, I sometimes refer to it as 30C because it's tax code 30C. So I apologize if I talk about the 30C tax credits, but these are tax credits for installing charging. These are available, these were also discontinued early, but they're available for chargers and equipment that's placed in service and operational by June 30th of 2026. Now, that might sound like a long time away, but sometimes, particularly for commercial installations, it can take a while. There can be permitting issues and energization issues and infrastructure issues. So I encourage you to definitely, if you're considering installing infrastructure, now is the time to do it. Don't wait. So, in addition to the federal tax credits, some states and utilities offer incentives or rebates for EVs or charging infrastructure. So, in a lot of cases, these incentives can be stacked with the federal tax credits. So, if you want to install at your home, perhaps you want to install an EV charger, check with your local utility because it's possible that you could get an incentive, for example, $250 towards the installation of your charger, and you can use that in addition to the federal tax credit that we'll talk about more. So let's jump right into the 30C tax credits. The 30C tax credits are charging infrastructure tax credits for individuals, businesses, and tax exempt entities. It's up to $1,000 for individual or personal tax credits. If you install a charger in your garage or driveway, it's up to $100,000 for businesses and tax exempt entities. Now, it may sound confusing to have a tax credit for tax exempt entities, but they can get the tax credit through what's called a direct pay option. So essentially, if you have a tax exempt entity and you take advantage of this tax credit, you would file a form with the IRS as if you had already paid that amount in taxes, and you would end up getting reimbursed from the IRS for those tax credits. So there's a few rules to the tax credit. The first one is that it must be in an eligible census tract. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But it's really important that you check that, and we'll talk about that in just a second. The equipment must be new. It has to be placed in service and fully operational by June 30th of 2026. The equipment can be bi-directional. That means not only can you charge your vehicle with the equipment, but if you want to get bi-directional equipment, it can actually power your home or feed back into the electric grid. The equipment must be used and owned domestically in the US or US territories by a domestic corporation or entity or individual. So I'm going to hand the next couple of slides over to Jordan since she's worked with the Natural Resources Defense Council. They worked really closely with the IRS to help make these tax credits available in as many census tracts as possible and for as many customers as possible. So Jordan, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Ingrid. So, 2/3 of Americans can access the 30C tax credit where they live to install chargers. Some places are left out due to being both high income and urban. But as you can see by the fact that this map is heavily shaded in blues and yellows, the vast majority of the US landmass is eligible to have credits for installing chargers at businesses or at homes in those places. The blue shading just references eligibility via a non-urban status, and the yellow is via a low-income status. And while this census tract criteria can seem confusing and hard to kind of parse through, there's luckily this easy lookup tool that is available from the US Department of Energy and Argonne National Lab. We'll have a link that we can send out. And also, if you just search 30C eligibility, it'll come up pretty quickly. But you can use the address tool at the top to search your home address. You can also look up different names of businesses there too, and it will show you where your census tract is at. And if it's shaded yellow or blue, then you're going to be able to access the tax credit. So it's pretty easy. And a lot of organizations and businesses and policymakers worked really hard to make sure that this credit was accessible to a large number of people and businesses so that they can install chargers. So just make sure that you're using it while we have it. I'll turn it back to Ingrid.
Great, thanks, Jordan. And I forgot to click ahead, but you can just enter the zip code or your address right in this little box that's circled here in the upper right-hand corner of the map. And that'll make it really easy to identify whether your census tract is eligible. Sorry about that, Jordan. So let's talk deep dive on the tax credits. The individual tax credits are up to 30% or $1,000, whichever's less, per single item of property. I'll define what that is in just a moment. The infrastructure or the charger needs to be installed at a primary residence. If you have enough money for a vacation home, you can probably afford a charger there. And you file for your tax credit the year it was placed in service. So basically, if you install a charger next month in February, you would file for that with your 2025 taxes, which would be during the early 2026, the tax season. So for business tax credits, you can receive up to $100,000 per single item of property, or up to 6% of the project cost. Now, 6% doesn't sound like much, but if your project meets prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements, you can receive a 5 times multiplier. So then you're getting 30%. The equipment must be depreciable property, which means it must be used for a business purpose, and it can include charging for 2- and 3-wheeled vehicles. For tax-exempt entities, it's basically the same rules as for businesses, except for tax-exempt entities, there's 2 ways to claim your credit. You can use the direct pay option, which I spoke about earlier. So nonprofits, municipalities, counties, churches, schools, you can go ahead and file that tax form as if you had already paid taxes and received the tax credit. If you choose this direct pay option, you need to notify the equipment seller. If you're working with a contractor who's selling the equipment, you need to notify them that you're going to use this option. Alternately, the seller who's selling you the charging equipment can claim the credit, and they would disclose in writing the amount of the credit that they're passing along to you. So this could be an interesting and positive way to factor that credit into your construction costs to bring down the upfront cost of installing chargers for a business or for a tax exempt entity. So we mentioned single item of property. So what is a single item of property? It's basically your charging port and whatever is needed to make it operational. This includes your charging equipment, whatever supports it, whether it's a wall mount or a pedestal, all the wires and conduit. If you need a panel upgrade to support this charging function, it will help pay for that, and any charge management systems. It also includes installation costs. Now, a battery storage system as a backup is also eligible for this tax credit. This could be a backup for power outages or could help moderate electricity pricing. It needs to be used to support the chargers, and it also needs to be in the same space, physically adjacent. And that counts as a separate single item of property. So to put this, to look at a schematic, so basically you can see we have the connector, the charging port, the pedestal, wire and conduit, panel. All of this is needed to make the charger operational, and it's eligible. And of course the installation, and that's eligible toward your tax credit. So a charging port can have multiple connectors, but it can only provide power at the port's rated electrical output to charge one motor vehicle through one connector at a time. So basically what that means is in this schematic, you see the vehicle on the right, there's two cords and connectors attached to that charger on the right-hand side. It's likely that those are different connector types, maybe CCS and NACS. You can only use one of those to charge a vehicle at the time, so that would mean that that would count as one charging port. So if you have a property, if you have a business or a tax exempt entity, or even if you're in a home that has multiple chargers and you want to install more than one charger, here's how you would break down the costs of those chargers. For example, if your charging port was $5,000 and then you had another one for $5,000 and your wire and conduit came to $1,000 and your panel needed an upgrade, another $5,000, and your construction costs were $10,000, you would basically factor all those costs in and divide it by the number of chargers, and then you'd get your single item cost. So if your total project cost was $26,000, and then you used the prevailing wage and apprenticeship, you met those requirements with your installer, then you would only end up paying $18,200 for this entire installation, or $9,100 per port. Now, just note that these numbers are definitely higher than it would typically cost to install a home charger. This is a commercial example. Installing a home charger in your driveway or garage typically costs about $1,000 to $3,500 in total, without any tax credits or incentives. The cost depends on things like how far away your panel is from where you want your charger. So essentially how much wire and conduit you need and whether you need a panel upgrade. Installing charging for commercial endeavors is often more expensive because if you install in a parking lot, you need to do trenching and digging and repaving, and that adds a lot to the cost of a project. So, okay, so now you're convinced. You're like, I need to install chargers. So how do you get started? Well, first, head on over to pluginamerica.org and we can drop the link in the chat. And we have these checklists that you can download or print, and for consumers, businesses, or tax exempt entities. And it basically gives you a roadmap of everything you need to get started. So next, as soon as you have your checklist together and the link to this map is on your checklist, the first thing you want to do is make sure that your project is in an eligible census tract, as Jordan spoke about earlier. So you can go ahead and use the search tool, enter your address or zip code, and if your census tract is in this green or this yellow, then you're in good shape. And if it's not, then you're not eligible for the federal tax credits. And I would encourage you to check out other resources like utilities or your state. The next step is to check with your local electric utility. You want to do this for a few reasons. Your electric utility may actually have additional available incentives, and you certainly want to take advantage of those. They can help you determine the electrification timeline, which probably isn't a big deal if you're just installing a home charger. But if you're installing chargers for a fleet or business or multiple chargers, you may want to check with them for their electrification timeline. And they also may be able to give you some electrician recommendations. So, so as you're looking for an electrician, I encourage you to go to plugstar.com. The electrician that you find will help assess your panel and offer a quote. It's important to communicate with your electrician about applying for and pulling permits. They're not necessary everywhere, but your electrician will know, and it's important to make sure you have those in place because they can take a while. And then ensure that your contractor, if you are a business or tax exempt entity, this does not apply if you're just doing a home charger, but if you're a business or tax exempt entity, make sure that your contractor meets the prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements so you can get that full 30%. So I encourage you to check out plugstar.com. You can browse new and used EVs and compare models. You can find incentives, find home charging options. You can actually find chargers to purchase on the website. It'll help you find an electrician. You can find an EV dealer that's Plugstar certified, meaning that they've passed a course to help them understand EVs and how to sell them. You can also find EV events like ride and drives where you can connect with other EV drivers. The easiest way to do this is to go to plugstar.com and add your zip code in this upper right-hand corner to customize to your location. This will help you find dealers, vehicles, electricians, and incentives that are specific to your area. Plus, if you still have questions, you can click on the chat at the bottom, the chat icon at the bottom right corner of the page of the website, and they can connect you with a live person during business hours. So once you've got your charger installed, you're up and running, tax season rolls around this time next year, you'll want to download Form 8911, or you'll want to go to the IRS page and get Form 8911, which is also supplied in a link on the checklist. And it's a pretty straightforward form, and you'll use this to claim your tax credit. So now that you know all about tax credits, I'm going to turn the floor over to Julio. He recently installed home charging in his condominium and helped the condominium homeowners association install chargers in the shared parking spaces. So both of these projects were able to take advantage of the tax credits and other incentives. I'll turn it over to Julio so you can hear his story.
Thank you, Ingrid, and thank you for the introduction too. And for the almost hundreds that are in this call that is still, that are gonna be joining me in my story. So I'm Julio Ortiz Rivera, EV driver. I'm board member at River Point Condominiums here in Connecticut. And like Ingrid mentioned, even before we had an EV, I had interest in EV in electric vehicles. And something that we did was a project that we leveraged some of the incentive that Ingrid mentioned to do to install chargers in the shared spaces, but in the different levels of the parking garage. But then fast forward, we own our car, and during the National Drive Electric Week, I met an electrician, and that electrician shared with me about how he handled installing chargers in multifamily housing and how he went about all the electrician stuff. that are hard for me to even describe it and mention. But something that it gave me was the confidence to understand how I can install in the parking spot, it connects to my meter, and I can get all these incentives that have been shared with you. So that is what we did, that confident drive to bring that to the community where many of us were able to install it in our own parking spot and each one of us funding the project, right, because it's our personal fund parking spot, but taking advantage of the tax credit. And it was very, very simple, like to follow. Like it wasn't complicated. The electrician, every certified electrician must know about this tax incentive. I can help you navigate. And they help us even to filling out the form, submitting it to the utility company. But it was amazing, at least for me, it was that I didn't know about what the utility company incentives were providing in the yearly basis. At least in Connecticut, we have Eversource, that is a utility company that we have in our household, and they provide two programs. I'm just gonna break it down very quickly. One is to charge when you're charging off peak, when you have control of that, and they give you like $120 a year. But the other one is also where they manage the scheduling of the charging, and it gives you $300 a year. So they give you the flexibility so you can pick one or the other. And for more information, you can go to their website and find more details about it. But then we're talking about two incentives. So I think in the poll, there were like 52 that have um, cars already, 23 of you that are planning to become an EV driver, and 12 of you that are curious. This is the time to take advantage of those incentives. It's like having like filling out your car gas tank every day and you have a car ready to go every day. You don't need to worry about it while you're sleeping. So to bring it home, and I hope that all of you have questions and I can answer at the end. Um, to summarize, the process was simple. Everything that it have been shared here from Plug in America is as it is, right? Like it's at your fingertip. Is practically it's very accessible. Um, and once you start taking the action, I kind of speak about the business incentive, but at least the residential it is very straightforward process where within like a month or so, you can get it and you can get the incentive, the reimbursement is there. So it's pretty amazing. So with that, I'm gonna hand it back to you, Ingrid.
Great, thanks, Julio. So yeah, it sounds like it was an easy, simple experience. The resources are accessible, and you're loving the convenience of just waking up every single morning to the equivalent of a full tank.
Oh my,
So,
yes.
okay, so I'll jump into key takeaways and then we'll open up the floor for some questions. So with regard to the EV charging infrastructure tax credit, the key takeaways are that first, it must be in an eligible census tract. So Jordan pointed us to the tool, the locator, and so it's got to be in that census tract, or unfortunately, you're not eligible for the tax credit if you're not in an eligible census tract, at which point I would encourage you to check your utility and state incentives. Um, we defined a single item of property. We identified that battery storage for charging is eligible as a separate single item of property. There's three types of EV charging tax credits. There's individual or residential, there's business, there's tax exempt entities. And we identified that using the prevailing wage and apprenticeship, meeting those requirements adds a 5 times multiplier. Perhaps most importantly is that this tax credit is ending on June 30th of 2026. So if you're even thinking about it, now is the time to act. So more broadly, EVs offer many benefits, not the least is which that you can stop wasting money on gas. EVs make great fleet vehicles. Installing charging makes owning an EV cheaper, more convenient. It can improve your property value. It can drive business. States and utilities may also offer incentives, which may be able to be combined with a federal tax credit. And you don't need to own an EV to install a charging station. So if you're in that group that identified as EV curious, or my next car is going to be an EV, I would encourage you to take advantage of the tax credits now, because you can install your charger, have it energized and up and running. And then when you do get your EV, you just pull right in and plug in. It doesn't get any more convenient than that. So I'm going to point you to our resources, which hopefully will show up magically in the chat, thanks to our wonderful team. I encourage you to go to Plug-in America's website. You can get those checklists. You can print it out or download a PDF. Check out the tax credit eligibility locator. Go to plugstar.com. It's our one-stop shop for all your EV and charger shopping needs. And if you still have questions after our Q&A session, I would encourage you to check out our EV support program, where you can either call or email or use the chat on our plugstar.com page, and you can actually communicate with a live agent. Um, so yeah, I will open up the floor for questions.
All right, so you still have time to submit your questions in the Q&A box, but some have been trickling in, so we're going to start to sprinkle some to our speakers here. Thank you guys for spreading all this wonderful information. So first question here, and I think this might be more appropriate for Ingrid, but whoever can chime in, is the policy, referring to the 30C federal EV charging tax credit, retroactive to infrastructure that has already been established?
So if you installed, say for example, you installed a charger last year, then you would probably still be able to submit that. You would need to get all your receipts together, and I would encourage you to get one of those checklists, even though you've already installed. But you'd need to get all your receipts together and make sure that it meets all the requirements. And then you should be able to still submit that form to the IRS with your taxes this year for last year. Before that, I don't know. You'd have to consult a tax professional, because once you get back in time, it's definitely beyond my pay grade.
Great, thank you, Ingrid. And then we have another anonymous one. The previous one was also anonymous. I think either Jordan or Ingrid can answer this. And though we address this, I think it might be good of a refresher. Does 30C also cover residential charger installations?
You want to do this one, Jordan?
Yeah, sure. So yes, there is a residential portion of the credit and a commercial portion of the credit. So if you're installing a residential charger just for your home, that's where you can access that $1,000 portion. And then the larger commercial credits for installing multiple chargers or at your business is much larger, I think up to 100,000, just because those prices are much higher, as Ingrid pointed out.
Great, thank you, Jordan. And then from Bruce, we have a question, I think, again, for Ingrid, but feel free to chime in. You mentioned earlier that the charger had to be placed in service and operational by June of 2026. What does operational mean?
That's a great question, Bruce. Basically, what it means is that it needs to be an actual charger. So you can't just have an outlet that you're planning to plug a charger into later. So you actually have to have the charger. It has to be energized. So if somebody were to pull up, even if you don't have an EV, if somebody were to pull up an EV that has the right type of connector, you should be able to just plug it in and charge at that point. And it would need to be fully operational by June 30th.
Awesome. Thanks, Ingrid. Then I have another one, which I think anyone who feels comfortable can take, also from Anonymous. If you are a business and receive this credit, can that business charge customers to utilize the charger?
Yes, absolutely. Please do. Please use this to install a charger at your business.
Yeah, I know that a lot of, actually, ironically, but a lot of gas stations are actually using this tax credit to install chargers at the gas station, because a lot of gas stations have convenience stores nowadays, and they don't make a ton of money selling the fuel. They make money selling food and snacks and coffee in the convenience store. And so if somebody goes and fills up their tank with gas, it takes about 4 minutes. They may or may not go in the convenience store. But if somebody comes to charge their EV, they're more likely to go in and get some coffee or get some snacks. And so they see a real business opportunity in this. And so they are able to take advantage of the tax credits and then charge people to use those chargers.
Great. Thank you, Ingrid. We also have one from Richard. Are there any incentives for municipalities?
So that's a great question. I suspect there are. I'm just not familiar with any. I know that there are with like municipal electric utilities, but I suspect that there are some big cities out there that may offer um, incentives. So it's definitely worth checking those too if you're in a city that might offer those.
Great. Thank you, Ingrid. And then let's see, we have another one as well. If I replace a charger with a new one, is that eligible for a tax credit?
I could take a stab at this one. I think it would be. I don't think there's any reason, like if you had a charger, I don't think there's any reason. Your equipment that you replace it with needs to be new, but I don't think there's any reason that you couldn't replace an old, outdated charger with a new charger.
Awesome. I have one here for Julio, and anyone else who wants to answer this can jump in. How do you convince a condo HOA to A, allow for individual chargers and or B, install a charger for shared use? I live in the suburbs of Chicago in a 40-unit condo. We've discussed this, and many owners are of the drill, drill, drill and burn more coal mindset, so they don't want to support this type of work unless there's something in it for them. How can I help? How can I handle this issue?
Well, something that it help us to answer the first question in terms of the shared spaces is to show the value proposition, right? You need to be transparent with the community and share the benefit that it brings not only for the EV cars, if not for the value of the properties in the condominium. You install a couple of chargers immediately, the interest of those EV drivers. Well, maybe some people don't want it, but those that have an EV charger and don't have a condominium, they don't have a charger in the condominium, they can appreciate more having a condominium that have the charger because of the convenience. And then we did our due diligence before sharing it with the community. We understood what the incentives what was the incentive was going to be, the investment that we needed to make, how long it was going to take, and the return on investment. So that is one. In terms of the individual chargers, the story is very different because now you're talking with a different audience that have potentially have home EV chargers. It has some cars already that are using the one sharing the condominium, and they have the experience already. So now it's less about talking, convincing someone. It's more talking about offering the opportunity that maybe some of them were craving for already, and making it easier for them. So and understanding the logistics, all of that. So it's more about communication, communication, communication. Having a board that is engaged and is thinking about not only the condominium, about the environment, the value of the properties, the convenience of the unit owners. I can go on and on and on with that. And then after you have that package, presented it to the community in a way that is looking not just in the 3 year from now, you're thinking about 2030, 2035, because eventually we're moving in that direction and everybody knows that. Just think about how the flexibility or the convenience that a unit owner that in Chicago, there is a lot of people working remote too that are staying at home, and the convenience just to be in your home, that charging your car in there, the safety. I can continue going on, but please do not hesitate to reach out offline. I have a lot of resources too, like that I can offer one-on-one in terms of my experience. Find me on LinkedIn or something, and happy to share more details because it is a fun journey. It shouldn't be hectic. It should be fun and it's for the benefit of the community. Those that oppose are sometimes are the loudest, but are the minority.
Thank you, Julio. That was great. Okay, we also have another question from Daniel. I'm not sure which type of plug I will be needing since I plan to purchase an EV. What are my options? Can I install a 50A plug and get the charger later? think anyone who feels comfy can take this one.
So, you definitely, Daniel, you're definitely going to need a charger. You can install a plug, but you're going to need a charger in order to take advantage of the tax credits. You cannot just install the plug and take advantage of the tax credits, unfortunately. So yeah, as far as whether you're going to need an NACS or 1772, yeah, there are adapters, and a lot of vehicles come already with the adapters, and a lot of vehicles are switching to NACS. So unfortunately, you cannot just install the plug and get the charger later. So I would encourage you to get your car install your plug, and then get your car and buy your charger and do it all by June 30th.
Great, we have another one. I think either Catherine or Ingrid can take this one. For fast DC charging, it usually costs more to charge. What can I expect to pay using a level 2 charger at home?
I can grab this one. Charging like on average, a typical charging session at home costs about $7 to $18, whereas a charging session at a public fast charger can cost $24 to $36 or so. Um, and I saw someone, I don't know if this is the same question, but I saw someone in the chat specifically asked about P-Seg in New Jersey. I think the residential rates are around 16 cents per kilowatt hour. That would apply there. So yeah, you can save a lot of money charging at home and then ideally use fast chargers when you're on the road trip and that speed is a value to you.
Just adding on to Jordan's response there, it also depends on the car. So I saw some questions on here related to either driving a full EV or a plug-in hybrid. Obviously, depending on the range, you're going to have, it's going to depend. And so one thing to, as you're looking at research, maybe looking at utility website, seeing what programs they offer, and the cost to charge at home, that would be a strong recommendation.
Thank you, Jordan and Catherine. So from Frederick, I think anyone can answer, does the charger have to be accessible to the public?
I can take this one. So if it's a personal charger, absolutely not. And if it is a charger for a business, it actually doesn't need to be accessible to the public. If you have a business and you want to install workplace charging for your employees, but nobody else, you can absolutely use it for that. Or if you have a fleet and you just want to be able to fuel your fleet vehicles with electricity and save money, you can absolutely use it just for your fleet vehicles. So no, it does not need to be available to the public.
Great. Another question from Katie. For the individual tax credits for charging infrastructure only apply if you typically owe on taxes, correct? If you typically get a refund, the credit wouldn't be applied to that amount, correct?
That's a great question, Katie. With the EV tax credits, you were able to get the tax credit transferred. And so you were able, as an individual, to take advantage of the tax credits if you did not pay taxes. And for the EV charging tax credit for tax exempt entities, we have that direct pay option. So if you don't pay taxes, you can still take advantage of it. But if you're looking at using the individual EV charging tax credit, you will need to have tax liability in order to take advantage of it.
Thank you, Ingrid. Earlier in the Q&A, someone had asked, can you expand on how EVs help the grid as one of the benefits that Catherine talked about at the beginning? Catherine, can you expand on your answer there?
Yeah, of course. And I actually dropped a link into the response there. There's a great NRDC blog that talks a little bit more about how charging EVs can help strengthen the grid. But broadly, there's the nice thing about EV charging is that it's adaptable, so you can choose when to charge your vehicle. And many utilities are actually offering time of use rates to encourage folks to charge overnight. While people are sleeping, there's less demand for electricity, and so there's more spare capacity on the grid. So I encourage you to check out the blog post that lists a bunch of different programs that utilities have, and including, we talked briefly about B2G. That's another way of actually seeing the car not just as a vehicle to get around, but actually as a big battery that can help store electricity as well.
I'll also add that we found time and time again, and many other economic studies have found this, that EVs put downward pressure on rates, especially light duty EVs, to the benefit of all utility customers. So while like EVs are cheaper to charge than gasoline vehicles, that's saving EV drivers money because those are bringing a new source of revenue on the grid while better utilizing existing infrastructure. That revenue more than makes up for what they cost to serve, like any new infrastructure from the grid that's required to serve those EVs. And so it's benefiting anyone who is paying an electricity bill, not just people that drive EVs.
Thank you both. From Barbara, and I think Ingrid can take this one. What is the deadline to apply this credit to the 2025 taxes?
Oh, so you would, if you installed a charger in 2025, you would just file this form. You would file the form with your taxes for this year. Yeah. If you installed in 2025, you're golden. Just file it with your taxes this year. And as long as you meet the other criteria, including the location that census tracks, you should be good to go.
Awesome. From David, how are the geographic eligibilities defined? Are there other options if I'm not in a qualifying census tract?
So the census tracts were defined based on their status as either non-urban or as low income. So if you're not in one of those census tracts, like using the lookup tool, that's when you should probably go and look for programs through your local utility, through your municipality, and through your state to see if there are other programs that you take advantage of. That said, even if you're eligible for 30C, you should also look for those programs because the 30C credit was designed to be stackable. So if your utility has a program and you're 30C eligible, you can stack those together. But if you're not eligible for 30C, you can also look to those other programs.
Yeah, and just building on what Jordan said, the 30C tax credit and all of the EV tax credits were part of the Inflation Reduction Act, and they were passed by Congress, and so they were very specifically targeted at these populations, the non-urban populations and low-income populations. So it's part of the law that established the tax credits.
Awesome. Another question, what are the current requirements for apartment building owners for providing EV charging?
That is going to totally vary by where you live. There are state and local and city building codes that determine what the requirements are in your area. I would just say, like, in general, something that's becoming more common is requiring EV charger readiness for new buildings. So you're building a new apartment building, you need to have the conduit and wiring ready to plug in an EV charger, even if it's not, built with EV chargers in place already. It has to be ready to install those. But yeah, you would have to look to your local building codes, which I know isn't a fun answer.
I would also add that there's what are called in a number of states have right to charge laws. And this sort of goes to Julio's point as well. Certain states, and we can drop a link in the chat for a right to charge law. We have a page on this on our website, Plug in America. But there are certain rules in states that make sure that people who want to install EV charging, if you live in a condo or in some cases renters, have a right to install charging. So I would encourage folks to check that out and see if you're in a state that has right to charge laws if you're interested in moving forward with that.
Great, thank you. Um, One for Julio. How did your condo deal with people leaving cars plugged in when others wanted to charge?
Well, that yes, at the beginning we didn't know how to manage that. I'm gonna be honest with you because as everything new, right? The association need to evolve and grow. But there is something that we found that working with ChargePoint, their software provide the capability that if someone leaves the car a little bit longer than it's supposed to be, we give a grace period of 1 hour. If they don't move their car, they start charging at a very high rate. So believe me, they start moving it at a certain point. It's capped out because some people at the beginning start forgetting and thought that we were joking. But you as an association, you need to create the parameters and the rules around it to ensure that everybody can benefit from the convenience of having a charger in the condominium. And believe me that it works. It works. But that is a good problem to have, right? That people want to use it and want to charge. It's more about how it's managed. But the software in the hardware, it actually provides a management system that you can do it by yourself as an association and you can control it.
Awesome. Thank you, Julio. A question from Leslie. Can you get two tax credits for installing both a charger and a bidirectional battery storage system?
You can't claim the tax credit twice, but you can include a battery storage system as your like total cost to calculate how much tax credit you're eligible for if the battery system is part of your like charging systems, which it sounds like if it would be bidirectional that it would be. Ingrid, I don't know if you have anything else to add there.
So, in the most recent guidance, a battery storage system associated with the EV charging infrastructure is counted as a separate item of property. So it is sort of like getting two tax credits. I mean, you're filing at the same time, but it would count as two separate items of property, which means that if you did it in your home, you'd be able to get up to $1,000 for the charger, but you'd also be able to get up to $1,000 for the battery setup. Similarly, if you did it as a part of a commercial entity, you could get up to 100,000 for the the chargers, or for each charger, because each single item of property and the storage system would count as a separate single item of property.
Great. I think we have time for one last question before we wrap up. From Bruce, lots of interest in charger option. Is there a place to see different charging options? Are there turnkey installers who will install a charger that is connected to a charging network for fee collection?
So I think, so first of all, to just see actual chargers, check out plugstar.com. There's tons of them. You can see them in all different price ranges with different functionalities, different setups. But there are turnkey systems, and I would encourage you, probably the first place to look would be to check in with your electric utility. Check to see what they have as far as incentives, and they could probably point you if you're trying to install chargers as part of a business and you want to collect money for it. Check with your utility. They can probably put you in touch with some EV service providers.
Just really quickly before we close, this is related to a previous question in terms of the attendee that is not eligible for 30C based on their location. For folks that don't have an EV yet, I did want to flag that the Ford Power Promise is a residential benefit for people who are looking to purchase an EV. They actually offer a complimentary home charger with standard installation. And so that may be an option if you don't have an EV yet, or if you know of somebody who is interested in purchasing an EV, but does or leasing an EV, but does not live in a locality that is applicable for the leasing.
That's a great point, Catherine. And sort of building on both what Catherine and Jordan talked about, a number of utilities now are offering a free charger when you get an EV, if you participate in one of their programs, like a time of use program or a managed charging program, they'll actually give you a charger. So, yeah, if you don't qualify for the tax credit, there are some really cool other options out there.
Awesome. And Ingrid, one final, now real final question, and I think with this we can close it out in a good segue to a reminder of our resources. Robert said, I missed the IRS tax credit form number. Can you repeat it? Thanks.
I think I have to look it up, but I think it's 8911. But if you go to if you go to pluginamerica.org, you can go to the tax credit checklist, and there's a link to the form right there.
Perfect. Thank you, Ingrid. And thank you to all our panelists. If you asked a question in the chat, it's likely that we'll be able to answer you through email. You can reach out to any of us through our AV support program, and we'll send all these resources. The recording will be available on our website, as well as all this information, and we will follow up with an email. You will also get this in your inbox. So with that, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you to our speakers for all this really useful information, and Julio, to your account. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day, y'all. Bye.